I think it's probably a good time to start. Keith, if you're all ready.
Yep, that's fine. That's fine, Kevin. Thank you. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the latest Foulger Underwood webinar, a guide to help you towards a successful sale or merger of your accounting practice. And my name is Kevin Reid. I'm the host of today's show. I shall be asking the questions of Managing Director Keith Underwood over the next 30 to 40 minutes or so. We're going to talk about understanding your personal circumstances and potentially that of other equity holders, and why that's such an important starting point in considering a deal. We'll then look at your practice and how it works. And then obviously we'll talk about making your practice as attractive to a potential acquirer or merger partner as best as possible to maximize its value. Now, for those of you watching live, it's great to see so many of you joining us today. You're more than welcome to send questions into us. The rule, I guess, will be that I'll broach those questions with Keith at the end of the session, but of course, there are always exceptions to the rule. And if any of the questions seem particularly pertinent to where we are in our discussions, obviously, I'll throw them in at Keith as we go along. But most likely at the end of the session, but during, if it seems timely to do so. Now, as you'll see, the screen that's shared at the moment just gives details of myself and Keith and what we're going to cover today. I shall now stop sharing that screen so that you can see the whites of our eyes.
Hello.
So there we go. So there we go. So, Keith, are you ready? Raring for the next?
Yeah, fine. Yep.
Very good. Okay, so we said that we talk about personal priorities and plans as the key place to kick off our discussion today. Why is it so important to understand the plans, priorities of equity stakeholders, and why is that a good starting point?
Well, it's always good to have people understanding where they're going. You only actually sell a practice once. It is certainly an event. And although you might think about it every Friday or every end of month, it does need, the word is commitment. And the stakeholders' objectives of going down this route needs to be fairly well ironed out and understood in multi-partner firms between the partners, as well as individuals if they're a sole practitioner. So we do need to understand where that's going. And these things are nuances, really. These decisions are nuances depending upon what you are. So multi-partner practices, it is not unusual for us to be faced with 2 or 3 different aspirations, 2 or 3 different exits. Whereas obviously with a sole practitioner, it is a one route situation. Yes, I'd like to sell. I suppose most of this is predicated on personal ambition, aspiration, but it's usually heightened, I suppose. Activity is heightened when you get to an end of a lease, or if in fact you're falling out with your other partner, or in situations where there's a strategy difference going forward, or you see some opportunities of combining with somebody else, or somebody else taking on your client portfolio who can perhaps exploit it more fully.
Keith, obviously the falling out of partners and strategy are very important points. A lease seems like something that's, why is that such an important thing?
Well, I think it's historic. I mean, see, most people used to roll over leases for 5 years. And if you're say age 65 or 60 even and wanting to roll over for another 5 years, the reality of it is you've most likely got a PG, a personal guarantee attached to it, and that's going to take you 5 years further down your career. And that makes, it just concentrates the mind. It gets people looking above the parapet at what the alternatives are at that stage.
Sure, thank you.
So I think
I interrupted you. My apologies.
No, it's all right. I think when it comes to sole practitioners, it is much easier. I mean to say there is only one decision there. It is whether to sell or to continue. Very few sole practitioners, unless they are significantly larger, and there are the old ones around who have 5 million of fees, but they are very few in number. But normally, if you've got up to 300, 400, 500,000 pounds worth of fees, and you're a sole practitioner, you're unlikely to have invested in succession. So in fact, the route you're going down, and a very, very suitable strategy, no one can criticize it, would be to take your profit shares and eventually sell as and when you wish to at a particular time, which is good in the marketplace. But with multiple partner practices, it's obviously different. And you do get these, as I say, different aspirations. And sometimes you get a very difficult situation where a younger partner is holding back the retirement of an older partner, if it's a two-partner situation, just because perhaps the younger partner doesn't want to create another, having worked perhaps for 15, 20 years with together, doesn't want to create another relationship, or doesn't feel any other relationship is going to be satisfactory. So they tend to hang on until such time that there's a joint decision to retire.
Now, obviously, so if you do have a multi-part practice, it is aligning everyone's direction of travel and ambitions and plans is very tough. However, once you get above a certain size, you then have enough mass to actually have more options, I guess, really. We're talking 5-partner plus.
Yeah, so it's a matter of financing as much as anything else, and also the form of governance. You'd say that most sole practitioners, two-partner firms were most likely fairly autocratic, make their decisions, get on with it, don't procrastinate. Once you get up to 5 partners, there is obviously has to be a consensus. Everyone has to be looking at the same objectives, and it becomes increasingly difficult as you go up the scale to get everyone with exactly the same objectives for the group or for the business going forward. So that's where things sort of fall apart. People decide to go off on their own. If they're specialists, they go off and form their own boutique type operations because they feel possibly, if they're very successful, they're contributing more than the rest of the partners. All those sort of factors come in, and all those are in evidence in the sort of work we get every year. There'll be examples of all those situations.
You talk about autonomy and lifestyle. That means that a sale is often the best option. But how do you kind of plan for that? What are the factors?
Well, obviously, in a smaller practice, you can adopt whatever lifestyle you like. We sort of look at lifestyle as against commercial. The larger the business, the more rigorous perhaps its routines, its expectations of chargeable hours. It's much more formalized in structure, and that moves it away from what we term one end of the scale, which is lifestyle. And therefore, it is something to bear in mind when you're looking at a sale, because that lifestyle will have actually created a culture within your organization which will pervade across the other stakeholders, including your employees, and indeed possibly to your clients as well, in the portfolio of clients. And that will sort of focus the minds on the type of practice that perhaps your clients or indeed your employees will work for. And that has to be taken into account in the broadest sense when you look at a sale and the party who is going to acquire you. There has to be some sort of conformity or transitional arrangement which takes it from lifestyle to a perhaps more commercial, more exacting type form of operation.
We've seen, obviously, when people talk about sole practitioners, there is often an image that's created of an old-fashioned firm, without wishing to disparage anyone. But we've obviously seen these micro firms that have been setting up very, very quickly using digital platforms. What are the issues around them from a sale or merger process? What are their particulars as such?
Yeah, it's a very interesting point, Kevin. We are seeing increasingly that young entrepreneurial accountants using QuickBooks or Xero, for instance, platforms, are developing businesses quite fast. They are entrepreneurial, and it's interesting that they have lower overhead costs, better profitability, and are fairly well focused on the clients they wish to bring on board. I think in looking at those businesses, we've seen 2 or 3 now who want to acquire. They don't want to acquire what you've just referred to as, or what I would refer to as, a traditional practice. Multiple, full set of skills, services across large and small clients. I mean, these people are more focused and driven really by the functionality of Xero and QuickBooks and other platforms, where in fact scale is so important. The profitability levels on some of these we've been looking at is up to, this is profit before tax, is certainly sort of 50% level, and depending upon the services they're offering, it can be higher. So you must imagine that the scale situation, we are seeing some combinations here of similar types of practices, and they are linking together and providing opportunities for sale merger, which are totally different to the retirement type general practice that we've been referring to so far. So there are different models which are attracting acquisitions and mergers that are really scalability situations, which will enhance profitability for the larger business and obviously give you growth, which you wouldn't necessarily be able to obtain in the organic marketplace. So yeah, that's an exciting development, really.
So would it be fair to say then, with these micro digital firms, obviously they can grow quickly, but even they, with all the technology they have at hand, because I guess of the people resource and the actual servicing of clients, physical servicing of clients, they can only go so far before they would look to inorganic growth or to scale up by merging, perhaps.
Yes, but a lot of these are very focused on their market sector, so they are sort of digital marketing, and quite exclusively doing that in a particular sector or for a particular type of client. In fact, some of them eschew, they're not interested in audit. They're not interested in that end of the marketplace. They're very focused. So I suppose to answer your question, yes, there will be a cap, but with fewer people employed per dollar through the door, they are most likely the ability to grow maybe by 5 or 6 times is much easier than it would be with a general multi-service practice of the more traditional nature.
Okay, all right. I think it's a really interesting point. Just to kind of summarize, then, what would whether you're a sole prac or whether you're multi-partner, what mindset do these people need to be in towards getting the wheels in motion as such?
Yeah, I think you need to really explore your own thoughts and what you're going to do. What the individual, whether he's in a 4-partner firm or as a sole practitioner, he's basically at the moment working perhaps 1,500 hours, some more, some less. You're going to release 1,500 hours of your time, which is not insignificant per year. And the question is, what are you going to do with it? And in fact, if someone comes to us and said, I want to sell, we do tend to go into this sort of discussion to say, what are you going to do with yourself? You realize that the proceeds you get out of your sale is not going to give you the same return as running the business, although you are absorbing 1,500 hours of your time a year. So you're going to release the 1,500. Obviously, financially, one assumes accountants can work out whether they can live off the proceeds or not, and whether it's financially right. But it is a question also about what you're going to do. What about your partner at home, your domestic partner? Do you want to travel? You can't go and cruise. In fact, you can't cruise the world at all now. So, the old adage is you can't cruise and you can't play golf. Sorry, Kevin.
Sorry, I was just going to say, would you say generally there's not quite enough thought that goes into it at that initial stage? Or it does require bouncing off of someone else to help kind of focus or understand your direction?
I think the key factor here is the timing. And yes, you do need to bounce this off. We'll deal with timing in a minute, but the lead in time, if you're going to do 2 years of consultancy or handover, which is not unusual, even if it's on reducing time, and you need 6 months to get to the sale, perhaps, even without a great deal of grooming at the front end, grooming of the practice, that is already 2.5 years from the date where you can get your 1,500 hours back and start doing something else in a serious way. So yeah, the planning of it is important, but the mindset going through this process is so so key. And part of that is you've got to get back to your practice and know what it is you're selling. Once you've made your personal decision, you need to get back and understand. I mean, say KYC, know your client. It is really KYB, know your business, know your own business and every facet of it, because all that will be displayed on the table at DD, and good or bad, I think I've used polish or scruff, will become evident. So we always say transparency is totally important if these deals are going through. So you must be prepared to display everything.
Is it quite a sobering process? Obviously, Keith, you know, you've gone through that initial.
Was the word sobering? Sobering?
Sobering, yeah. In terms of, you know, you've gone through understanding who you are and where you're going. That takes some, you know, mental effort as it is to then go, right, I'm now going to look at my business. You have to be of the right mindset and prepared to put some hours in and some work. It's you have to put effort into this.
Yes, I mean, see, there's no way you can just decide on Friday to throw your keys on the table and they're picked up by somebody else and it continues. It does take a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of analysis. And as in any deal, and you'd invite anyone listening or on the webinar will know that, you know, you don't want to extract every dollar out of your business. You need some sustainable profit for the future, which you can demonstrate to a potential buyer. And if it's dressed in the right way, can be a really good hook for certain types of buyers when they recognize that perhaps not all revenues are fully generated. So you need to know what the unexploited services are, but you need to know the blemishes as well. You need to know whether your clients, you know, by the aging of the clients, just simple things like that, as to whether they're going, this SME and owner managed business clients are going to retire and therefore the fees are going to go down. I mean, to say it is not good practice, and we keep on saying this to people in these sort of seminars, it's not good practice to be defensive, to run your business protecting it on a perhaps not increasing the fees every year, and not necessarily developing new clients, because every business has to be healthy, it has to grow, it's going to lose clients. And to be sustainable for a purchaser, it has to be healthy. And that means charging reasonable market rates, which have gone up every year for inflation, a certain level of service to the clients. And you've got to be able to hand this over so somebody can take those clients and make 5-10 years similar sort of revenues out of those clients for the future. That's what it is. You're selling a sustainable revenue stream.
And this is where we talk about sitting on the other side of the table, becoming the acquirer essentially, and thinking like them. Before we move on, Keith, we've had a question in, a really good question. I'm going to leave it to the end because I don't think we need to interrupt our flow, but just to let you know that the question is noted. Thank you very much. We'll broach that at the end in the next 10-15 minutes or so. So Keith, thinking like an acquirer, sitting on the other side of the table is a term, you know, I hear a lot.
Yeah.
Again, not an easy thing. It's about mindset, and then I guess it's process, isn't it? Thinking about what they're going to want in place, and then aligning it, and coldly, I guess, looking at what you have and how it matches up or not.
Well, this is absolutely key. And you obviously want to go to the market and attract if you like, a trade sale, which I term it as. But that trade sale means that somebody is looking out for and is compatible with your business, wants your business, and can generate those sustainable profitabilities and some synergistic benefits as well. So it is very important to turn it around and ask yourself, who is actually going to buy my business? Now, we've just taken on, as an example, we've just taken on a sale of a business which is in West Scotland. And we thought about this very carefully as to who would be the acquirer. And that's what you have to do, even if you're in central London. You have to think, who is actually going to invest money and come into this location and take over my clients and my staff and take this forward? Now, there are a whole range of buyers out there, from consolidators who have their good points and their points you wouldn't want to consider. You have two-partner firms, you have sole practitioners, or there are very few sole practitioners around these days with money to invest. That seems to have disappeared over the last 5 years as a potential purchasing. And I mean, people do not want to go into sole practitionership generally. But larger firms, and then you get into the larger firms who are multi-officed. So you have to ask yourself, is my office large enough for X, Y, Z? They've got 3 offices. What are the sizes of those offices? Is there a sustainable fee level for those offices to make them viable? And am I of that size? So if you look at, even if you look at a £1 million firm in London, for instance, there are certain practices in the 30 million to 50 million range who won't even look at them as a separate office, ongoing separate office. It's too small. They need a sustainability of 3.5 to 5 million to make a separate office in or around London. So, I mean, it's that knowledge. So those people are out for a £1 million purchase, unless it's a bolt-on, which means you're totally subsumed in the other party's office. It is not really a practical solution to bring them to the table for discussion. We're just wasting both parties' time. It's those sort of nuances that are very important. And at the smaller end, it's also important to find out that the style of servicing the client is very similar to yours. So you're looking at the other side and finding out what sort of style they adopt and whether that's going to be suitable for your clients. Are they going to be attracted to these people and the way they service the clients? Some people go out to clients, some people just stay in their offices and wait for the clients to come to them. There's a whole range of different nuances there, which you need to understand to make sure that the party you're talking to is going to be appropriate for your staff and for your clients.
Okay, that's brilliant, Keith. So if we then turn it back a little bit anyway, inwards, an internal perspective, you know, when you're running a practice, it's going on and on. You're getting through, you're managing the various statutory dates and making sure your clients keep ticking along. How do you look at what you've got and say these things are valuable or not, or extremely valuable? What kind of things would you be looking for?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, to cover that hopefully with what we were saying just now, looking at it from the other side and what they would regard as valuable, because it's not what you regard as valuable, it's what somebody else as an acquirer regards as valuable.
But sector expertise, you know, the potential to generate further fees, perhaps, you know, if there's leverage in there. Yeah,
there's leverage in that. I mean, you know, there are things like insolvency services, the wealth management services, which might be in the larger firm, which they may be able to access out of an acquisition, accessing from new clients being brought into the business. But I think it goes deeper than that. I think the biggest issues we have in terms of compatibility when you look at the larger firm is lockup, charge out rates. I've got a list of these, so I'm not billing processes. Is it done every month? Is it over £1,000 and it's billed, or is it done every year still?
And why are those kind of things important? Why do they need to match as much as kind of the sectors you cover or the type of advice you provide?
The acquirer is going to adapt this acquired portfolio of fees to their practices. So, you know, if they are billing every month, and they would normally be as a larger firm, then they will be bringing your clients onto that billing process. And if you can get your own clients onto that process before you go into a sale, you're in a much stronger position to retain those clients, rather than the clients feeling, oh, change of name, XYZ's retired, we've got a new partner involved in it. Oh, and they're asking us to pay 4 times a year rather than once a year. And they're chasing us very heavily now for, you know, recovery of debtors, for the amounts due and outstanding. All that is disruptive to the smooth handover. And if you can sort out your own business and adopt some of these practices before you go to the market, it is always favorable.
It's the equivalent of looking under the bonnet, I guess, really. You know, it can look nice on the outside, but these are the things where if someone's really checking how well your practice runs.
Yeah, and I think the analogy is good. I mean, say, if you can sell an electric car to somebody who has only got electric cars in the fleet, it's fine. If you then roll up there with a diesel car and you expect them to change the engine round, then it's a cost to them. Any conversion, and it goes within accounting practice, anything that has to be converted to the processes of the purchaser is a cost of time and effectively a cost of money. And people are looking increasingly at aspects like, you know, the IT platform you're on. You go down to those micro practices and they are not interested. They are only willing to acquire, if they're a zero-based practice or a QuickBooks, they're only willing to acquire QuickBooks or Xero. They do not want to go through the conversion of, say, 200 clients to a new system. They want those people on that system already. So it's worth considering at the bottom end of your client base and the smaller SMEs, which systems you're on. Is it going to be acceptable to a purchaser or not? So
is there a way of like summarizing what you need to look out for from an acquirer's point of view? Because it will be different to how you view your own practice and how you think it's going. They're going to look at very, very specific things, a hit list of things that they want in place.
Yes, I mean, some of these things that we've mentioned just now are very relevant. They'll be on anybody's checklist, DD list. But I suppose ultimately it's financials. Is this really sustainable? Do these clients, portfolio of clients that we're acquiring have the longevity to last 5 or possibly 10 years and contribute at the same level or an enhanced level to our profitability? If you've got 5 partners sitting around the table and they're saying, why should we put out this money to buy this practice of $1 million? You know, they need to be seeing bottom line benefits, which is all to do with EBITDA flowing through the bottom line to each of those partners who are effectively putting up the money to make the acquisition. So the profitability, sustainability of it is absolutely key, which brings us back to the analysis of the portfolio. Very key, deep analysis, know your client, know how old he is, potentials for new services that can be sold into him. IHT planning, if they're aged, you know, there are various angles to this, or even probate. But then it's quite interesting. We've got a probate practice at the moment, which is qualified for probate. And unfortunately, the purchaser isn't qualified for probate. And the probate certified individual is retiring. So there are edges to all these things where you must make sure the skill sets are with the purchaser. But the purchaser needs to have sustainable profitability to make this work.
So we're moving along swiftly. We're a half hour in, so I think we need to start summarizing and just getting towards conclusions. There's a lot of ground that needs to be covered to try and optimize the process and I guess the value of the sale or merger.
Yeah.
If you were talking to someone about this, Keith, what kind of time frame, and you were trying to help them, what kind of time frame would you generally talk about for this? Can you do this in 6 months, 6 weeks, or what do you generally like to hear?
Well, what we don't like to hear is that, which we usually do a couple of times a year, is the incumbent has died, and therefore the deal's got to go through in about 3 weeks. And that, a couple of times, unfortunately, a year, that does happen. Yeah. So you can get things geared up, but the deal structure is totally different because there's no continuity with the sole practitioner. But I suppose in general terms, we would like to do the analysis work and what we call the status review at least a year out, preferably 2, before somebody wants to go to the market. The reason for that is if you're going to change things like, significantly change lockup, get your billings out quicker, perhaps even to look at your employment contracts, which we always advise, you want to do this before you start talking to the other side, to the acquiring parties. And if you're really going to move the dial on something like lockout, it is going to lock up. It's going to take 6 months to a year to really achieve your changes as regards the debtors and work in progress. And you obviously need to demonstrate that. Otherwise, you're trying to say, yes, we've made taken some management action to improve this, but it's not going to materialize until after completion, which immediately raised the question as to whether it will ever materialize for the purchaser.
So this goes back again to mindset and, I guess, planning and stamina, really, that if you want to do this properly, get some really good value out of this, you can't get to the end of your road and then think,
you can do. I would say half our work is people getting to the end of the road and saying, we'd like to do this in the next 6 months. Others come to us with issues and say, is this going to be a problem for a sale in the future? And we go through the detail with them on a consultancy basis and try and steer them into a better light, a better solution, a better prospect for a potential purchaser. I think going on to answer your question on timescales then, with that period prior to marketing, once you get to the marketing of the prospect into the market, do the analysis, produce the IM, which is an important 5-6 page document on what we're actually selling. Once you get to that stage, you are most likely looking at 4 to 6 months to get the deal done. And of course, after it's done, after completion, the principal, even if he's retiring, is going to have to do a handover. And you should look at 2 years for that, even if you're only on call in the second year. So they're the sort of timescales, say 6 to 9 months for actually undertaking the work. After that, there's still a handover. But if you really want to get the best possible deal and be really pristine when you go into the shop window for sale, then you most likely need at least a year before that to sort out some of the, what I call the scuffs, which can be polished up by the time you go to the market and won't be an issue for the purchaser. We just want to make these things as smooth, as transparent as possible, with the purchaser saying, great, this looks absolutely superb, no major problems. So therefore that will increase the price. You go up the quartile pricing situation, providing it's profitable, of course.
Keith, can you just summarize the kind of the deal and post-deal structure, or the importance of the fact that what you're selling is sustainable? You mentioned that the principal who's sold may have to kind of carry on helping liaise or smooth through for a year or even 2 years. That then links into kind of earnouts, clawback discussion. Words we hear. Could you just pull that together and explain what that all means?
Well, the deal structure, which we've covered in another webinar, I think, but I think the deal structure you're all targeting is certainly not money out on day one. It is a multiple of fees or a multiple of EBITDA to get a value. And that value will be paid out most likely over 2 or 3 years, depending upon the size of the business, but it'll be paid out as consideration. And it will be subject to usually loss of clients and performance, in other words, over the 2 years following completion. So there is a price adjustment, which usually goes against the third or fourth payment. And that is reflecting the performance of the 2 years post completion.
Yeah.
So that's why the consultancy for 2 years actually is quite useful for both sides.
Yeah. And obviously, we do have another webinar around deal structure, which obviously, if you want to drop us, Keith or myself, a line, we'll be happy to get the link to that archived video over to you. So we don't want to go into that too much, but it is important just to cover the fact that the sustainability of the practice, the value that's attached to that sustainability, you don't sell it and then run off. The sustainability that's priced in has to be demonstrated.
Yeah, the actual consultancy post completion, and we assume that you're only going to be talking and working with as a consultant people of like minds. You know, we've got them, we reckon their culture's correct for your clients, but it's still very important for the retiring practitioner, even if it's in a 4-partner firm, to be handing over and telling their clients who they've worked with for the last 10 years that this is the solution for them. They are growing. They need more services. They need a larger firm to take them through the next stage of the client's growth. You should be able to tell them, you know, subject to negotiation, that there won't be any price increase for a couple of years. But here you are, here are the people, greater skill sets, most likely younger, and these will be, you know, compatible, and your clients are going to welcome them. If they start saying, I wish these new partners and new practice had come in 5 years ago because we were getting very tired of listening to you, then, you know, that's an interesting situation to be faced with.
But not too worrying if you've managed to get yourself on a 3-month cruise somewhere. Keith, I just wanted to say thank you very much. We've covered a lot of ground. We're pushing towards the 40-minute mark, so I don't want to keep people for too much longer. So the question that is there any other points you wanted to make before I broach the question that's come in?
No, I would say this is we do seminars on this subject, which I want to say we cover in about 2 hours plus a workshop. And of course, we can't do those at the moment, but we'll hopefully get back to them at the end of this year. But it is a detailed situation. Every client, every one of you sitting out there, have unique situations that need to be addressed, and that's why it is not a standard one piece of clothing covers all. Certainly not. It is very much a customized arrangement for you, and we're very happy to discuss your own particular situations either through this chat or after the event.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Keith. Right, so the question we had in, which is a really interesting one, just it's slight, not off topic, but just worth broaching at the end, I think. What are your thoughts on private equity players looking to buy out practices? Pros, cons? There's a mention of valuation yardsticks, but I think that really you need to kind of access our other webinar to find out a bit more about that. Any thoughts you can just give?
Yeah, we've got considerable experience with private equity overseas in the accounting market and professional service market, and here. The one thing you'd say about private equity, which is in fact a form of consolidation, is that if they go for 100% acquisition, you want to watch your second tier management and younger partners, because to a certain extent they're disenfranchised. They're not going to get the profit shares that the retiring partners had in the past. So the whole ethos of the business changes. What I would say is private equity, and we've got the experience of this here and offshore, 5 years and there is a further event. So another private equity firm is brought in, or if they've got other aspirations, it might go for an IPO. You may have equity in the top firm. You may be offered equity in the top firm, which means you might get a better, some skin in the game, as they say, and you get a better payout subject to the event in 5 years' time. I think the jury is still out as to whether this will work, based on the fact that most accounting firms are based on loyalty with clients and servicing of clients. And once you've removed the profit share factor, although there are some very good people around willing to work on a fixed share salary basis, does it have the commitment? Does it drive that business forward healthily over the next few years? Or are you just subsumed into a larger organization, which, to be honest, with some of the PE businesses we've found, particularly in Asia, where we've got some very big deals, we have found the wrap-up of the roll-up of corporate services by larger firms. It ends up as all the middle-based clients, all the homogenous clients in the middle, are actually serviced and continue with those organizations. The high demand clients usually go away, and are serviced by new boutiques, quite often serviced by those new boutiques who are formed from partners dropping out from the consolidated PE-backed arrangements. So it's almost the middle ground, if I put it that way, that stays as volume, not demanding and certainly not cheap end, because they will drop off fairly quickly with a private equity based firm.
Yeah.
But I mean, you have to be careful. Private equity is EBITDA driven. It must make rationalizations, and quite severe rationalizations, in the professional service sector.
Yeah, there's an inexorable direction with it, isn't there, once you go down the PE route?
Yeah, and for a large portion of client portfolio, it will most likely be suitable. But the top end, really high profitability advisory end are, in my view, and the experience we've seen elsewhere, unlikely to stick long term. They're going to go off to get that profit motivated, hands-on partner experience that you can really only get with significant part ownership, if you like.
As opposed to a firm where the focus is on synergies and workflow and
yeah, nothing wrong with workflow. Yeah. I mean, so you can make great improvements on workflow. Back offices can be streamed and you get a lot of profitability out of it. But it was an interesting question. You know, we don't want to mention any names here, but there are 3 or 4 of them in the market. They have different, some of them are only buying 51%.
Yeah.
But PE backed usually means we run the bottom line. The bottom line has to improve. And I think that's where perhaps Baldwin's didn't get it quite right in those first 3 or 4 years, that they weren't actually affecting the bottom line. Certainly Tenon, back in the years 2000, and Vantis, we did quite a bit of work for those two. They did not push that bottom line forward through the synergies. The opportunities now are even greater to do that because of IT developments over the last 15 years. So it is quite exciting, and you can create a much larger and more profitable business. But I still think that dropout in clients will occur, and also the ambitions of good entrepreneurial partners, if you like, are going to be steered towards doing their own boutique services in some way.
Yeah, certainly. No, that's a really good answer. Well, as you said, it was a really good question as well.
It was.
So we're hitting 45 minutes, so I think this is very much the time to wrap up. I'm just going to share a final screen and basically say, Keith, thank you very much for your insight. I'd like to say thank you to everyone for watching today's webinar. If these issues are on your mind at the moment or in the future, then please contact us at Foulger Underwood. Obviously, Keith's details are now up on screen. There's no hiding place for him. We do have other webinars available, particularly around the M&A market for accountants, and we'd be very happy to share those with you. Again, please drop us a line and we'll get links over to you very, very quickly. We also have articles on the Foulger Underwood website, regular updates on the accounting world via YouTube as well. Thank you very much for watching, particularly the contributor for our question as well, which was really appreciated. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you